In 331 BCE, the world stood on the precipice of transformation. The Persian Empire of Darius III, a civilization of immense wealth, boundless ambition, and unmatched splendor, reigned as the greatest power the world had ever known. From the golden palaces of Persepolis to the mighty walls of Babylon, its dominion stretched across 3 continents, connecting vast cultures through its advanced roads, governance, and diplomacy. Yet, on the horizon, an unstoppable force emerged: Alexander the Great. With an unrelenting vision and an army forged in the fires of conquest, he marched toward destiny, preparing to challenge the empire that had stood unrivaled for over 2 centuries. The clash between these 2 titans would reshape history. After his decisive victories at the Granicus River and the Battle of Issus, Alexander the Great had already begun dismantling the foundations of Darius III's empire. City after city, satrap after satrap, Persia's once unshakable dominion was beginning to crumble. With each triumph, Alexander not only expanded his reach, but also absorbed the wealth, knowledge, and military strength of the Persian territories. Yet, despite these setbacks, the great King of Kings, Darius III, refused to surrender his vast empire without a fight. He gathered his remaining forces, rallying the might of the East, determined to make a final stand. The fate of the Persian Empire, and the course of history itself, would soon be decided on the battlefield on the plain of Gaugamela. Darius III assembled an army that vastly outnumbered Alexander's forces, drawing warriors from the farthest reaches of his empire. From the banks of the Tigris to the mountains of Bactria, soldiers of every tribe and nation answered the call of the King of Kings. War elephants, elite Persian immortals, and scythed chariots designed to cut down enemy ranks were prepared for battle. Confident that sheer numbers and superior mobility would crush the Macedonian invaders, Darius carefully selected Gaugamela as the site of his stand. The vast open plain was the perfect battlefield for his cavalry to maneuver and his chariots to charge unhindered. He believed his strategy would spell certain victory, restoring the honor and dominion of the Persian Empire. But Alexander was no ordinary enemy. His tactical genius would soon put Darius's grand army to the ultimate test. Alexander knew he faced a formidable challenge. Darius's army dwarfed his own, stretching as far as the eye could see, a seemingly unstoppable force of cavalry, infantry, and war chariots. But Alexander also knew that numbers alone did not decide battles. Strategy did. He had studied his enemy, anticipating Darius's reliance on superior numbers and the open terrain. Rather than engaging head-on in a battle of sheer force, Alexander devised a masterful plan to outmaneuver the Persian king. With the thunderous roar of hooves and the grinding of iron wheels, Darius unleashed his war chariots, deadly machines designed to shatter enemy lines in a single devastating charge. The Persian charioteers, draped in elaborate armor, urged their horses forward, their scythed wheels spinning with lethal intent, ready to carve through the tightly packed Macedonian ranks. But Alexander's army was prepared. They had studied the tactics of the Persian war machine, training tirelessly for this very moment. As the chariots barreled toward them, the front lines of the Macedonian phalanx did not falter. At the last possible second, the disciplined infantry moved with precision, parting strategically to create lanes that rendered the charging chariots ineffective. Instead of smashing through ranks, the chariots found themselves funneled into traps, surrounded by light infantry who swiftly neutralized both horses and riders with javelins and spears. Dust and chaos filled the battlefield as the once feared Persian chariots became a liability, their momentum lost, their drivers cut down with ruthless efficiency. With a calculated calm, Alexander signaled his troops into motion, not directly forward, but at an angle, shifting the entire Macedonian army toward the right. The Macedonian companion cavalry, his most elite force, led the maneuver, subtly moving away from the Persian center while maintaining formation. The infantry followed in perfect coordination, their phalanxes angled slightly, like the edge of a blade preparing to cut. At first, Darius hesitated, uncertain of Alexander's intent. His best cavalry, positioned on his left flank, was eager for combat, but the sudden lateral movement of the Macedonian forces unsettled them. If Alexander continued this drift, he would soon move off the prepared battlefield, onto uneven ground where Persian chariots would be less effective. Darius could not allow this. With growing urgency, the Persian left flank, primarily composed of cavalry, began shifting to counter Alexander's movement, stretching itself thinner in the process. What had once been a solid Persian line now began to fragment as units drifted out of position, unknowingly walking into Alexander's trap. The more they extended, the weaker their center became. Alexander, watching like a predator studying its prey, saw the gap begin to fall. The time was near. The moment Darius overcommitted his forces to counter the maneuver, Alexander would strike, not on the flanks, but straight at the heart of the Persian army. The battlefield was beginning to tilt in his favor. Though Darius had deployed as many as 15 war elephants in the center of his battle line, they did not make a decisive charge. Despite their imposing presence, the elephants did not disrupt Alexander's formations. The Macedonian army, well-trained and tactically superior, managed to counter all Persian threats effectively. Alexander's men closed ranks once more, their formation unbroken, their discipline proving mightier than the fury of Darius's charge. The Persian king had hoped to shatter the Macedonian army, but instead his own forces began to waver. As Alexander and his elite cavalry thundered across the battlefield, cutting through the Persian ranks with relentless precision, Darius III watched in horror. His once mighty army, which had outnumbered the Macedonians, was now in disarray. His carefully laid plans had unraveled before his eyes. His scythed chariots had failed, his cavalry had been outmaneuvered, and now his front line was collapsing under the sheer force of Alexander's charge. The King of Kings had always ruled from the safety of his golden chariot, overseeing battles from a distance. But now, that distance was closing. Alexander, riding Bucephalus with unrelenting fury, was coming straight for him. The Macedonian king had shattered every army that had stood in his way, and now he was within reach of the Persian ruler himself. Fear gripped Darius. He knew that if he fell, the empire would fall with him. His guards struggled to hold back the advancing Macedonians, but they were being overwhelmed. With his heart pounding, Darius made a fateful decision: self-preservation over leadership. He turned his chariot and fled. What began as a retreat soon became a full-scale rout. Seeing their king abandon the battlefield, Persian soldiers lost all will to fight. Panic spread like wildfire as men threw down their weapons and ran for their lives. The once great army of Persia dissolved into chaos, their banners trampled beneath the dust of their retreat. Alexander had not only won the battle, he had shattered the very will of the Persian Empire. With this victory, Alexander effectively destroyed the Persian Empire. He marched on to claim Babylon, Susa, and eventually Persepolis. Gaugamela was not just a battle, it was a turning point in history. It marked the fall of Persia and the rise of one of the greatest empires ever known. Alexander the Great had secured his place as one of the most legendary commanders in history.